I hope you look into more of my daughter's innocence and maybe go to the free Mackenzie Shirilla page or Crime Circus.
Some new developments connected to Steve and Natalie Shirilla started pulling attention back toward the Mackenzie Shirilla case, and online discussion quickly picked up speed again. A lot of people following the case started questioning decisions being made publicly, especially as more interviews, statements, and social media activity began surfacing. Public attention around the Shirilla family had already been intense for a long time. Earlier media coverage brought heavy discussion online, and people across different platforms continued debating everything connected to the case. But instead of attention slowing down, another wave of public activity pushed the conversation right back into focus. A lot of online discussion centered around whether staying highly visible publicly was helping the situation or making public reaction even stronger.
I would hope they would support me like I've supported that school for the past 7 years. I mean, I don't know why they didn't speak to me first or bring me in and have a conversation with me. I mean, that's their decision. I mean, all I am is one of their teachers, you know. I have no idea. You have to talk to the diocese for that kind of answer.
So this is clearly not just the events and the prosecution of your daughter, but the documentary itself. It just must have turned your life upside down. I
think it's more what I said about the marijuana. I think that's where it's going. I've seen a lot online that I'm saying they're going, okay, it's okay to smoke marijuana. You can go smoke marijuana, and I smoke marijuana.
Some people felt stepping away from media attention could have lowered the spotlight. Others believed continuing to speak publicly was an effort to keep certain points from being overlooked. That debate only grew louder after additional interviews and public appearances started getting noticed. People following developments closely pointed toward media coverage and online activity connected to support pages tied to Mackenzie Shirilla. Discussion spread quickly, and attention shifted toward how information connected to the case was being shared publicly. Another development that started getting attention involved a longer version of a TMZ interview. According to people discussing it online, Steve Shirilla encouraged viewers to follow pages connected to support efforts around Mackenzie Shirilla, along with creators covering the case. That immediately sparked another round of discussion. People online started debating which sources were reliable, which information deserved more attention, and whether public conversations around the case were helping people understand developments more clearly or creating even more division. As those conversations spread, attention moved beyond the original case itself and toward how people connected to it were handling growing public attention. Some online communities revisited earlier interviews and public statements. Others focused heavily on communication choices and media strategy. A lot of people appeared divided on whether continuing public outreach was helping shape understanding around the case or creating even more scrutiny. As discussion kept building, another detail started drawing attention. Social media activity connected to Mackenzie Shirilla began getting noticed more closely. Posts and messages connected to online accounts added another layer to an already heavily discussed situation. Basically, messages appearing publicly seemed aimed at keeping conversation around the case active and continuing engagement from people following developments closely.
If the diocese wants to test me every day, they can test me and I won't have any marijuana in my system. I can promise you that.
Do you think that there was, when you watched back the documentary, you said that you sat for 2 days with the producers. Yes. I'm sure there was a lot that was said. How do you feel about did you watch the final product? Was it a fair depiction of what you said?
I did. Oh, I did say what I said, but I think a lot of stuff was taken out of context, and we had a lot to say about what we think Mackenzie's innocence is in this, and that made me sound.
That immediately led to more reactions online, more discussion, and even more people paying attention to where the story could go next. What had already become a closely followed case suddenly had another chapter unfolding publicly. And people watching developments closely started focusing on one question: whether these public moves were changing how the case was being viewed, or making attention around it even bigger. Over the past day, another round of online discussion started building around activity connected to support pages tied to Mackenzie Shirilla. And people following the case quickly noticed new conversations starting to spread across multiple platforms. Posts connected to information previously discussed by creators covering the case began getting more attention. And before long, online communities were once again breaking down developments piece by piece. What stood out to a lot of people was how quickly the focus shifted. Instead of attention staying on older developments, public discussion moved toward newer public activity, media appearances, and the way information connected to the case continued circulating online. As more people started revisiting interviews and public statements, conversation kept expanding beyond the original events themselves. The spotlight moved toward communication choices, public messaging, and how different people connected to the situation were handling growing attention. One topic that generated discussion involved comments made during a public interview that touched on personal beliefs and lifestyle-related subjects. Those moments quickly spread online and became another talking point among people following developments closely.
There's more to it than just the 4, 5, 6 sound bites they had of us. Unfortunately, we had no editing, or we didn't have any of the control of the editing. They did what they saw fit. This is their product. They were very upfront with us when they spoke to us. And am I completely happy with how it came out? There's some things I like, and there's some things I don't like. And we've gotten a lot of support for her and her innocence in this.
The interview itself started getting heavy attention. People online revisited clips, shared reactions, and started breaking down different moments from the conversation. Some focused on specific answers, others focused on how those answers were delivered. Body language became a major topic. A lot of online discussion centered around pauses during speaking, moments where answers appeared more carefully worded, and general communication style during the interview. Some viewers believed certain moments reflected pressure connected to speaking publicly during a heavily watched situation. Others felt people online were reading too deeply into normal interview behavior. Public reaction quickly split. Some people believed appearing publicly gave opportunities to explain perspectives that supporters felt were being overlooked. Others questioned whether repeated media appearances were helping public understanding or simply creating more discussion around an already highly visible situation. That debate kept growing. As clips continued spreading online, viewers started paying closer attention to details that may not have drawn attention earlier. Small moments inside interviews became larger discussion points. Speaking patterns, timing of answers, delivery, tone, even brief pauses became subjects of online conversation. In highly followed cases, public attention sometimes moves beyond major developments and starts focusing on presentation itself. Not only what gets said, but how it gets said. That pattern appeared again here. People following the case closely started debating whether certain answers sounded prepared, emotional, carefully considered, or simply difficult to communicate under pressure.
And this is hard to do quickly, but when you say her innocence, explain that, because to most people, she was behind the wheel and
there was no breaking.
Well, yeah, she was. There is zero evidence of intent and prior calculation in this case. There's no evidence. And the only evidence the prosecution actually has is 4.74 seconds of black box information. Your car has a black box like the airplanes, but it doesn't record the cabin sound, all that. It's mechanical. And it is a non-linear recording. And what happened, or what our car experts said happened, was that the car was I can't explain the speed.
Some viewers pointed toward the difficulty of speaking publicly while facing heavy public attention. Others believe continued interviews naturally invited more scrutiny. As more discussion built online, another question started appearing repeatedly. Why continue stepping into public conversations when public reaction remains so divided? That became another major topic people debated. Some believed public statements helped keep certain perspectives active in the broader discussion. Others felt repeated appearances could bring even more attention to areas already being heavily examined. The conversation kept expanding, interview clips circulated, older statements resurfaced, online communities revisited previous coverage. People compared different appearances, looked at timelines, and focused on whether public communication surrounding the case had changed over time. At the center of much of the discussion was a larger question that kept coming back. How much influence does public messaging actually have once attention surrounding a case reaches this level? A lot of people online appeared divided. Some believed public outreach remained important. Others felt public opinion had already become difficult to shift. As attention kept building, people watching developments closely noticed another pattern emerging. Interviewers themselves appeared to become more direct as conversations moved forward, asking tougher follow-up questions and pushing deeper into topics already generating discussion online. That created moments people immediately focused on. Viewers started paying attention not only to answers themselves, but also to how conversations developed in real time, how questions were framed, how responses were delivered, how public reaction shifted afterward. And as more clips continued circulating online, discussions surrounding interviews, social media activity, public messaging, and broader case developments only kept growing, adding another chapter to a story that continued holding attention across online communities following every new update. Public reaction surrounding support for Mackenzie Shirilla continued becoming a major topic of discussion as more online conversations unfolded. As attention around the case kept growing, people across different platforms debated how much public backing actually existed and what role online communities were playing in shaping the conversation.
Speed. Let's first of all, I have no idea. Nobody is ever going to know what happened in that car. It's not that the car was going fast. It's not that the car crashed. It's why. There's no explanation of why. And the prosecution, even in this documentary, says, look, I turned over every rock. I looked at everything, and I couldn't find anything. So it's murder. So she did it on purpose. This prosecutor, in my opinion, is lazy.
One topic that repeatedly surfaced involved support pages, creators covering developments connected to the case, and audiences following those discussions closely. Different groups appeared to approach the situation from completely different perspectives, creating a divide that became more visible as public attention increased. Some people online believed certain communities were giving more visibility to arguments supporting Mackenzie Shirilla or questioning parts of public discussion surrounding the case. Others felt those communities represented only a smaller section of broader public opinion. That disagreement itself became part of the conversation. As online discussion expanded, people started debating not only the case itself, but also how social media influence can shape public perception during highly watched situations. Different creators focused on different details. Different audiences focused on different interpretations. That created an environment where competing viewpoints continued circulating at the same time. Public attention also shifted toward family dynamics connected to the case.
I instantly think it's the husband. So there's so much in this case, and there's so much omittance of evidence and changing of evidence and illegally changing evidence.
Legally,
there is
Steve, you're not suggesting there was something that went wrong with the car, are you? I mean,
I don't know. It could have. It's possible.
because the black box I would think the black box would have shown that.
Some people discussing developments online questioned whether communication choices and public appearances connected to family members were helping the situation or creating additional scrutiny. Others argued that public pressure surrounding highly visible cases can place families under enormous attention, making every statement and decision subject to intense public analysis. That conversation kept growing. As more interviews circulated and more public discussion unfolded, online communities started examining everything closely. Media appearances, messaging choices, social media activity, and how public responses continued evolving over time. Another detail that generated attention involved ongoing discussions surrounding evidence and interpretations connected to the case. Different theories and explanations continued appearing online. Some discussions focused on vehicle data. Others focused on timelines. Others revisited details already presented publicly and debated how those details should be interpreted. That pattern kept repeating. People revisited older information, compared different explanations, questioned previous assumptions, and looked for details they believed deserved more attention.
There was a
No.
I think what you're saying.
Hold on.
I think what you're saying is this sounds more like, at least in your head, vehicular manslaughter than it does murder.
Vehicular. It is vehicular homicide, and it should have never left the juvenile court.
Yeah.
That car was coming down that street at a good clip, and I don't know if I'm assuming you have no idea what the road looks like, but the road has a little bend in it towards the end. The car hit a dip in the road that's giant and dangerous, and we've got all kind of video of this dip. And when I went through it at a good clip, my car went flying. There's bottom out marks in the cement.
One particular area of discussion centered around technical evidence connected to the vehicle involved in the case. Online conversations focused heavily on how information connected to timing and vehicle systems had been interpreted publicly. Some people discussing the case pointed toward technical explanations that had circulated online previously. Others questioned those interpretations and argued that evidence should be viewed alongside the broader information publicly available. That debate continued generating strong reactions. As people revisited interviews discussing those topics, viewers closely analyzed moments where explanations were given publicly. Certain pauses, reactions, and exchanges during interviews became discussion points themselves. People following developments closely started examining not only what information was being presented, but how those explanations were being communicated. Public attention around interview footage continued growing. People replayed clips, compared statements, revisited older coverage, looked for consistency, and debated whether public messaging surrounding the case had changed over time. As online discussion expanded, another topic started appearing more frequently: the long-term impact of public activity connected to highly visible legal cases. Some people questioned whether continued public campaigns and online discussions could influence broader public perception. Others believed attention surrounding major cases naturally creates ongoing conversation regardless of public outreach efforts. That larger debate kept building. People online continued splitting into different viewpoints. Some focused heavily on legal outcomes. Others focused on public response. Others focused on media coverage itself. And as attention surrounding the case kept moving forward, online discussion showed no signs of slowing down. Every interview, every public statement, every social media development, every new conversation. People watching closely continued following each new update, trying to understand how public discussion surrounding the case could continue evolving as more attention remained fixed on what happened next.
We have contradictory evidence about the things that were said in the court. There's nothing that says prior content or prior calculation, and there's no intent.
We hear, you know what? We're out of time, but we hear your point. I mean, your point is that you need to show intent in order to prosecute somebody for murder, and you're saying that this feels to you like the most they could show is reckless, is vehicular manslaughter.
And her not pressing the brake, is not intent. Now, again,
we get it.
I get it.
So look, we are out of time. We really, really appreciate it. I know it's hard for you, but we appreciate you coming on.
Well, I hope you look into more of my daughter's innocence and maybe go to the free Mackenzie Shirilla page or Crime Circus.
As public discussion surrounding the case continued building, another topic started drawing attention: whether continued public statements and media appearances were helping public perception or creating even more scrutiny around an already heavily discussed situation. A lot of people following developments closely questioned whether ongoing interviews and public outreach efforts could shape broader opinion at this stage. Others believed public attention surrounding the case had already reached a point where changing public perception would be extremely difficult. That debate kept growing. One interview moment in particular generated another wave of discussion online. People focused on a section where Steve Shirilla responded to questions connected to explanations and interpretations surrounding details already heavily discussed publicly. Viewers following the exchange closely started debating not only the explanation itself, but also how it was presented during the conversation. Public discussion quickly centered around vehicle speed and technical evidence connected to the case. A lot of people online pointed toward information previously discussed publicly regarding vehicle data and timing. Those details became a major focus in conversations surrounding the interview. Some viewers questioned whether certain explanations fully addressed concerns people had been raising for a long time. Others argued that public discussions around technical evidence often become difficult to follow, especially when complex details start being interpreted in different ways across interviews, media coverage, and online conversations. That divide remained visible. As clips circulated online, people revisited publicly discussed evidence and compared explanations side by side. Vehicle speed became one of the biggest discussion points. People online debated how different factors connected to driving conditions, timing, and crash-related details should be understood. Some focused heavily on technical information connected to the vehicle itself. Others focused on how those details had been discussed publicly over time. Questions surrounding timing also appeared repeatedly in discussion. People following developments closely revisited conversations connected to vehicle recording systems and publicly discussed evidence connected to impact timing. That quickly became another area people debated heavily. Some viewers felt explanations presented publicly raised additional questions. Others believed technical evidence often becomes oversimplified once public discussion moves online. As attention kept growing, another trend started becoming noticeable. People were no longer focusing only on major developments. They were analyzing interviews line by line, statement by statement, reaction by reaction. Public conversations expanded beyond legal developments and moved toward communication itself, how explanations were being delivered, how details were framed publicly, and whether messaging choices were helping or creating more debate. As interview clips continued spreading online, people revisited earlier statements connected to the case and compared them against newer public appearances. That comparison process became a major part of discussion. People looked for consistency. People revisited timelines. People questioned explanations. People debated interpretations, and public discussion kept expanding. Another topic that surfaced involved long-term legal outcomes and what public activity surrounding major cases means after major legal decisions have already happened. Some people online questioned whether continued media attention could influence broader public conversation moving forward. Others argued that once highly visible cases reach a certain level of public attention, discussion often continues regardless of interviews, statements, or online campaigns. That larger debate remained active. As public discussion kept evolving, media coverage itself also became part of conversation. People following developments questioned what drives attention surrounding major stories and why certain interview moments receive heavier coverage than others. Some believed high-profile interviews naturally focus on moments likely to generate public discussion. Others argued that public interest itself drives what continues receiving attention. Either way, public focus surrounding the case remained intense. New clips continued circulating. Older statements resurfaced. Online conversations kept expanding. And people following developments closely continued watching how public discussion surrounding the case kept evolving as new attention shifted toward each new interview, statement, and public response. connected to the story. As public discussion surrounding the Mackenzie Shirilla case continued growing, another update started getting attention online. People following developments closely noticed activity connected to support pages tied to the case, and before long, new discussion started spreading across social media. At this point, conversations surrounding the case had already expanded far beyond courtroom developments. Media coverage, online communities, public statements, and social media activity had all become major parts of the larger story. Another topic people started discussing involved how major interviews and public appearances can shape public perception during highly visible cases. Some people online believed continued media attention gives families and supporters opportunities to keep sharing their perspective publicly. Others questioned whether repeated public appearances create even more public scrutiny once a case has already received major national attention. That debate continued growing. Not long after earlier discussion picked up, people following the case noticed updates connected to a Mackenzie Shirilla related page. According to people discussing it online, an existing post appeared to receive updated text, immediately creating another wave of attention. Questions started appearing: who updated it, when it changed, and what message supporters wanted people to focus on. Some people believed updates like this showed continued efforts to keep public awareness surrounding the case active. Others believed public opinion surrounding highly discussed legal cases can become difficult to change once major legal outcomes happen. That divide stayed visible. People following developments closely immediately started focusing on what the message itself was saying. Basically, the post thanked people who continued supporting Mackenzie Shirilla and encouraged people to form their own opinions surrounding publicly available information connected to the case. The message also included continued claims of innocence and referenced plans to keep pursuing legal options through official channels. It addressed relationship-related discussion connected to the case and stated there was never intent to cause harm. The post also thanked supporters who continued speaking publicly about the case and encouraged people to continue raising awareness. One part of the message that quickly generated discussion involved broader concerns supporters raised surrounding wrongful convictions and legal outcomes. As people online reacted, conversation immediately split into different directions. Some people supported the message being shared publicly. Others pointed toward evidence and legal findings that had already been discussed through court proceedings. Discussion kept building. People revisited older reporting, compared timelines, looked back at earlier public statements, and continued debating major details connected to the case. Toward the end of the same update, another section also started drawing attention. That section encouraged people to continue following support pages connected to Mackenzie Shirilla and referenced arguments supporters continued raising publicly surrounding evidence interpretation, vehicle data, and concerns about reasonable doubt. Questions surrounding evidence remained one of the biggest dividing points in public conversation. People following developments closely continued debating those arguments heavily online. Some believed concerns raised by supporters deserved continued discussion. Others believed publicly available evidence and legal outcomes had already shaped the larger picture. That divide remained active. As public attention surrounding the case continued moving forward, online activity itself increasingly became part of the story. Not just court developments, not just media interviews, not just public statements. People were now watching social media updates, support pages, and public messaging just as closely. And in highly visible cases, even a single update can quickly create another major wave of conversation once enough public attention builds around the story. As public discussion surrounding the case continued growing, another major conversation started building around questions people had continued debating for a long time. Intent, past behavior that had been discussed publicly, and how certain details connected to the case were interpreted by people following developments closely. By this point, A lot of people watching the case already had strong opinions. Some people pointed toward arguments raised during legal proceedings and publicly discussed information connected to the relationship history involved in the case. Others continued questioning how certain events unfolded and whether different interpretations deserved more attention. That divide remained one of the biggest parts of public discussion. People following developments closely often returned to one larger question: how do previous events, prior disagreements, or reported conflicts shape how people interpret what happened later? That became another major topic online. Some people discussing the case pointed toward publicly reported information and arguments previously raised during legal proceedings involving past relationship conflict and prior incidents discussed during coverage surrounding the case. Those details continued becoming part of larger conversations about motive, intent, and interpretation. Others argued that public discussion surrounding major legal cases can become heavily influenced by existing opinions once people begin viewing newer developments through positions they already hold. That conversation kept growing. As people revisited earlier coverage and prior reporting connected to the case, discussion expanded beyond individual developments and moved toward broader questions surrounding evidence, interpretation, and how people process information in highly visible cases. Some focused heavily on legal arguments, others focused on timelines, others focused on behavior patterns that had been publicly discussed, and public discussion kept expanding from there. As attention continued building, another topic started pulling focus. A statement connected to a school tied to earlier discussions surrounding Steve Shirilla had become part of broader public conversation, and people following developments closely started revisiting what that could potentially mean moving forward. Questions started appearing again. Could public attention surrounding the case create professional consequences? How do institutions respond when situations connected to major public discussion start bringing additional attention? And how much impact can outside events have once public visibility reaches this level? People online continued debating those questions. Some believed institutions often move carefully when situations become highly public. Others argued schools, particularly private institutions, may place heavy importance on reputation, public image, and maintaining certain standards. That conversation opened another broader discussion. People online started sharing stories and examples involving school environments and how different institutions respond to situations that bring unexpected public attention. Particularly in private or faith-based educational settings, some people argued expectations surrounding conduct and public perception can sometimes be handled differently, depending on policies and institutional standards. That led people into another discussion entirely. How much responsibility falls directly on individuals, how much falls on circumstances around them, and how organizations decide to respond when public situations begin drawing larger attention. People following developments closely continued watching for updates, because at this stage, attention surrounding the case had expanded far beyond original headlines. Now people were following multiple layers at once: legal developments, public statements, social media activity, media appearances, professional consequences, institutional responses, and how each new development connected back into the larger public conversation. As more discussion kept building online, people continued revisiting earlier reporting while waiting to see whether additional statements or developments connected to the school situation would bring another wave of public attention. Because by now, one pattern had become impossible to ignore. Every new update connected to this case, no matter how small, quickly became another major conversation. As public discussion surrounding the case continued growing, another development started pulling attention, this time connected to a school statement that had been circulating online. Questions had already been building regarding reports connected to Steve Shirilla and his position at Mary Queen of Peace School. As discussion expanded across social media and online communities following the case, people started looking for official information addressing what had been happening. That update eventually arrived. Basically, The statement explained that the school had become aware of allegations being discussed publicly online regarding one of its teachers and said steps had been taken immediately while an internal review moved forward. The message emphasized that student safety, student well-being, and maintaining trust within the school community remained major priorities. The school also explained that because the matter involved an active personnel-related process, information being shared publicly would remain limited while the review continued. The statement closed by thanking families and members of the school community for continued support while the situation remained under review. That quickly became another major topic online. People following developments closely started discussing what administrative leave could potentially mean and whether public attention connected to larger events surrounding the case may have played a role in how institutions respond once situations begin receiving broader visibility. Some people believed schools often move cautiously when concerns connected to staff members receive public attention. Others argued institutions sometimes act quickly when online discussion grows large enough to create broader concern within communities. Public conversation quickly expanded. People revisited earlier reporting, reviewed timelines, compared developments, and continued asking questions about how public attention surrounding major cases can sometimes reach areas beyond original legal proceedings. Another topic that started appearing more frequently involved broader conversations about family involvement during highly visible legal situations. People online debated different viewpoints. Some believed public advocacy efforts from family members are understandable during difficult situations. Others questioned whether continued public appearances and ongoing discussion can sometimes create even more attention than intended. That divide remained visible. As discussion continued building, attention also shifted toward public image and online presentation connected to people involved in the case. People following developments closely often noticed social media activity, public-facing content, and how online presence continued becoming part of broader discussion. That pattern appeared here too. Public conversation no longer focused only on legal developments. It expanded into public messaging, media coverage, online activity, family advocacy, and how people connected to major cases navigate growing public attention. As more developments continued unfolding, people closely following the story kept watching for what could happen next. Because by this point, even developments happening outside direct legal proceedings had started becoming major discussion points, showing how cases receiving heavy public attention can continue creating conversation far beyond where the story originally started. As more discussion around the case continued building online, people following developments closely also started paying attention to newer images and updates connected to Mackenzie Shirilla that had been circulating across social media and discussion communities. Public reaction quickly moved in different directions. Some people focused on appearances, others focused on ongoing legal developments, and others continued debating broader questions connected to the case itself and where things could potentially go moving forward. Like many highly discussed cases online, social media conversations brought a mix of opinions, speculation, and public reactions. Some discussions centered around rumors and claims being shared online, while others questioned how much information circulating publicly could actually be verified. That became another major topic by itself. People following developments closely continued debating what information should be taken seriously and what should be viewed more cautiously once stories start spreading rapidly across social platforms. As more images connected to Mackenzie Shirilla continued getting attention, online conversation kept growing. Some people believed public interest surrounding the case remained unusually high because attention had expanded beyond legal proceedings and into broader internet culture. Others argued major cases often take on a life of their own online, where discussion continues building long after major courtroom developments happen. That pattern appeared again here. People revisited older coverage, compared timelines, tracked updates, watched public reactions, and continued debating details connected to the story. At the same time, another conversation kept appearing across social media: how much online discussion shapes public perception once a case reaches this level of visibility. Some people believed public narratives can strongly influence how cases are viewed. Others felt official outcomes and publicly documented information remain the most important pieces to focus on. That divide continued showing up throughout discussions surrounding the case. As attention remained active, one thing became clear: interest in this story had not slowed down. Every update, every public statement, every social media development, every new discussion point, people continued watching closely to see whether new information, future legal developments, or additional public activity could shift conversation surrounding a case that has continued drawing major public attention. And with that, that wraps up today's update. A lot of developments continue unfolding around this story, and people online are still following closely to see what happens next. Drop a comment below with thoughts on everything discussed today. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone following the case too. Stay tuned for more updates.